Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. Today's episode is all about DIY embellishments and then putting those to use on a layout. Here's a quick update though first. I'm going to be using my Counterfeit Kit for this project, and this was a sheet of paper that I was looking for when I put my kit together and I couldn't find it, but I found it and I'm going to add it into my stash, and so I just wanted to give you that quick update that that is now in my kit. If you haven't seen my kit build, I will link you up below so that you can check that out. As you may know, the kits that we put together over at CKC are always inspired by a pre-existing kit, and then we do this project of making our own embellishments called forgeries on the 4th. And so I'm going to be forging a couple of different parts here. I've got some frames that you can see in both pictures, and also those little tassels. So let's go ahead and get started with the tassels. Very simple materials needed for this: a fork, some twine of some sort or embroidery floss, and a pair of scissors. So first I'm going to double up a piece of string and put it through one of the tines of the fork, and this is going to become the tie top of our tassel. And then I'm going to make sure as I'm starting this wrapping process of the rest of the string around the fork, that I make sure that string is lying straight so that I can wrap this string all the way around, and that that little handle bit of string will be incorporated. Then I kind of pinch the ends of the string there while I work on the rest of this. So I'm going to take that kind of handle top of the tassel and kind of tug it down a little bit so that it's out of the way for the next step. The next step here is to take another part of string. You want these to be pretty long because you're going to be tying these, and if you don't leave yourself enough length, it's going to be really hard to work with. I go ahead and tie just a single knot on the front of this little tassel in between those tines, and I tie it nice and tight, and then I'm going to go ahead and thread one of those string ends through the tines, flip my fork over, and then on this back side I'm going to go ahead and tie it nice and tight in a double knot, and then I will clip off the ends of that thread. All right, go ahead and slide your tassel off your fork, and then you're going to clip those loops at the bottom, and the starting and ending string might be longer, so you go ahead and clip those to the same length. And then I just tie off this top loop up here, and I will clip that short. Now notice that this top loop that I did is actually a double portion of string, and you can do it single or double, whatever you want to do. Just note that that's what I did. And there's your little finished tassel. All right, before I use those on a project, let's go ahead and make these frames. I am going to use this tool by We Are Memory Keepers called the Frame Punch Board, and it can make all kinds of different shapes and sizes of frames without having to think about it too much. So I have chosen out a selection of scrap paper from my stash. This coordinates with my kit, but doesn't necessarily directly match the kit that I put together, and that's okay. And then I'm going to slice this paper into portions, and really the sizing doesn't matter too much unless you want a very specific size. So here I am creating a 3x3 square and a 3x4 rectangle, and I'm going to start off the tutorial with these. Now these guides are these clear plastic pieces that are next to this punch, and those help determine the width of the edge of the frame. So when you're punching the top, you want your widths to be the same. So you flip your paper over, and then when you're ready to punch the bottom, if you want a different width, you can move that guide and punch one side. Be sure to flip your paper over to punch the other side, and this flipping over step only happens when you have different widths of frames. So then you'll be left with this center portion still kind of attached inside of your frame, and this part of the punch board has this tool that you slip into a notch, and it will cut out that frame. And you saw me kind of slide it back and forth. It's really easy to slip in and out of that guide. And then I move my width guide to match either the thick depth or the thin depth, and I rotate my paper and align my cutting blade with that punched hole, because you don't want to cut through the edge of your frame. And then I just slide it, and it slices out the middle portion of that frame. Let's go ahead and do this one more time. This is going to have an equal frame all the way around, so I didn't need to do that flipping back and forth, and I won't need to move that guide when I slice out that center frame portion. Hopefully that was all clear. Of course, if it's not, you can go ahead and leave me some questions or comments and I will get back to you. So here's another look at changing the widths on this one for a tiny frame. And this one I think was 2 inches by 3 inches tall. And that's probably about as small as I would go with these frames. Well, actually, I think I got down to a 2-inch by 2-inch square. Now you can see all the different shapes and sizes of frames that I created, and here's a little bit of a bonus. After you're done punching out the inner frame, you're left over with these pieces that look a lot like photo corners, so I'm going to save those and use them as such. Okay, but what happens if you don't have this tool? I'm going to show you how to do this with your paper trimmer. I have this scratch piece of cardstock that I'm going to cut as a template, and I'm just going to cut that to the size that I want the opening of the frame to be. And now we need to do a little bit of math. I need to have at least a 1/4 inch on each side to make an equal frame all the way around. Now if you want the bottom to be larger, kind of Polaroid style, you'll have to either trim down your template, or you can, when you're cutting your pattern paper, make it larger on one edge. And then I just trace around my template, poke a hole through the center of that portion with my scissors, clip to each corner, and then follow the pencil line all the way around to trim the frame out. So that's how you can do it if you don't have this tool, but I highly recommend the tool. It's not too expensive and it can create a lot of fun embellishments really quickly. Okay, now that we've got some DIY embellishments, let's go ahead and put them to use on a layout. Here is a quick layout process video for you. I have these 2 photos that I took of my daughter's signs when she had her first job during the pandemic online at home, and she would put signs on her door not to disturb her while she's working. And while these photos aren't very much, I am going to turn this into a pretty layout with this very bold floral pattern. And what I'm going to do here is accentuate these photos with frames, and that's one of the things I like to do when photos aren't all that exciting. And I'm going to do a few more techniques on this layout as we go along. Now these photos were needing a little bit more pop to them because, like I said, the photos are very bland, and so I'm going to go ahead and give them a bit of a matte with this wood grain paper, which all plays in with the florals quite nicely. And the reason I chose that floral was, 1, it was in my Counterfeit Kit, and 2, flowers and leaves and vines kind of represent growth, which was definitely a true point for my daughter getting her first job. So all that worked together. Now I wanted to add a little more oomph to this layout, so I am going to trim down that floral by 3/4 of an inch on each side and mat it on this blue piece of paper, which I went ahead and gutted so I can save that paper in my kit for use later. And then I'm going to do this process of trimming out just portions of this pattern paper with my craft knife and letting them overlap these photo areas. Now, the craft knife and I are not very good friends, and so I did a very rough trimming with my craft knife at first, and then I'm going to come in with my scissors and do a lot more fine detailed trimming. And you'll see how this looks in just a moment when I've got all of these different areas trimmed out. I did give myself a little pencil mark border with where those frames were going to go, as well as pointed arrows at which leaves I wanted to cut out this way so I wouldn't lose track of what I was doing. And then I go ahead and move to putting together these little photo clusters here. I use the frame popped up on foam dots that's on top of the photo, and then I cut partial portions of frames as extra layers behind the photos, the mats, and that sort of thing. And then I grab other items from my kit to add a little bit of texture and dimension. I have some pom-pom ribbon, and then of course I have those tassels that we made. So I am putting the tassels and the frames both to use on this layout. I am going to glue those tassels down for now, but later on I will actually add some more stitching to them that makes them physically look anchored in place. And then a small bit of blue floral helps tie in the blue frames, the blue mat, and the florals on the background paper, and that's going to finish off my photo cluster. And I'm just going to repeat those same steps with the other clusters. I've got 2 photo clusters and then 1 cluster that's going to hold journaling down there at the bottom. Now I was trying to decide what to do with my title, and I went with this method. I'm going to use another frame, and I'm sticking with all the yellow frames that coordinate with all the other clusters. I did need to back it because my letters for my title are black and they were getting lost in that background paper. So I backed it with some blue from my kit, and then I gave it another part of the title that says first job. And I had a little bit of journaling left over from the bottom that talks about what her job was, and I went ahead and added that up to the top so that it goes along up there at the top, and it didn't quite fit at the bottom anyway, so that was a good place to put it. And here's the point where I'm adding some more hand stitching to this layout. I am poking some holes with a paper piercer onto a foam pad and giving the paper piercer a wiggle to make that hole nice and big. And then I'm going to thread this rough hemp twine through there. Now here's a tip. The hemp twine was pretty thick. It won't go through a needle. So I pulled out a tool for my sewing supply called a needle threader. And these are really inexpensive. You can find them in a lot of sewing supply sections of various stores. But what you do is stick it through the hole and then thread your twine through the needle threader. And the needle threader just has a thin wire loop on it, and that wire loop is flexible so that when you pull it through the hole, it pulls that thread through the hole for you. And that is how I added these little crisscross stitches onto the layout. It's holding my tassels in place as well as adding a little bit of texture up to my title block. And so that finishes off my layout for this time. I hope you enjoyed this video of seeing how I make some of my own embellishments and how I go ahead and put them to use on a layout. If you got something helpful out of this video, I would really appreciate a like. That does help my channel. I will be back on Monday with another Counterfeit Kit challenge using our kit inspiration to make a mini page kit and layout. So I hope you'll join me then. I'll see you next time.